Greetings! It's a very frosty morning here in Somerset. Yes, I've got the daft hat on, but I think it's justified today because it's -2. Well, it was -2 when I woke up. I think it's got slightly warmer now. But we've got quite a healthy frost on the ground, and they're threatening snow for this evening, which is quite a rarity down here really. Whenever we get it, it doesn't last very long. I mean, there has been times in history where it's been incredible snow, but not really as a sort of common thing, you know. It'd be nice to see it. Used to see snow a lot more when I lived up north. Anyway, just thought I'd catch up and have a little conversation about something that I've been pondering and just thinking about, you know, over the Christmas period, apart from my ever-increasing waistline. But I think that goes for us all, doesn't it, at Christmas? I think we're allowed that, aren't we? Anyway, that's why I'm out walking. Tackle the bulge. It seems to me that that the main purpose, if you like, and I think that's what I want to talk about really, is purpose of art, is kind of slightly misunderstood, especially these days. What with social media, I don't need to go into that. I mean, that's pretty obvious what these kinds of things, like I'm doing right now, how they've helped us, you know. And I don't want to be negative about it. With everything that's going on in the world at the moment, I want to try and keep positive about the good aspects of all the tools that we have in our toolbox. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to science music. I'm not. Actually, it's a polar opposite. What I'm interested in is the emotional stuff that makes people want to create. And I saw a brilliant quote this morning actually, where this particular professor said that creativity isn't a talent. What creativity is the want to express ourselves, and you can do that in a million different ways. Some people have a more direct way of doing that, other people keep it very simple, and neither of those approaches is right or wrong. You know, some of us spend our entire lives honing our skills as a creative to make it better, to push our own boundaries, to explore ourselves. But I think in some cases that sort of what I would call a really beautiful, and I use that word for the right reasons, I think, really, that sort of really beautiful, simple idea of just expressing yourself can and has, especially in the sort of 20th, obviously I guess from the midpoint of the 20th century, when with regard to music I'm talking about here more than anything else, but I suppose films and literature as well. But certainly since, let's say, of the advent of the talking movies and arguably the advent of the music industry as we kind of know it, the recorded music industry, where, you know, corporations and large companies got involved to sort of market that work. So if we take that point of reference, I think, you know, there was a purity to it, you know, and there always had been. I mean, people have been creating since the dawn of man, of course, you know, cave paintings, banging on an animal skin drum, whatever you want to call it, you know, whatever it was. It's an innate, instinctive, natural need for the human beings to express themselves. And I've pondered this for years, you know, where does that kind of come from? Why do we do it? Because really, in reality, if we were still living in caves and having to go out and hunt to keep ourselves alive, the instinct of survival, that really doesn't have anything to do with a creative need to express ourselves, if you like. That's literally just pure survival. So it's a really interesting sort of concept, I think, really, is that how did it develop? You know, where did that impulse come from? Well, in my estimation, it must have come from the time when, you know, human beings began to organise and put themselves into communities that built housing, that started to develop, concepts beyond the simple survival needs. And a lot of it, I think, came from communication. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to come across as an anthropologist or someone who understands the minutiae of human evolution, because I'm not. But, as a creative person who spent all my life in the world of creativity and the art world, one way or another, it has been a question that I've pondered many, many times. Where does that pulse come from? What's that purpose? That's the word for me. It's a kind of purpose. Just like people find a purpose for like a, what we would call, I don't know, a drive, a sort of vision for wanting to do something, whether it's vocational, like, becoming a doctor or an architect or something, one of the higher, what I would call the higher learning careers in lots of ways. Because I think that is I'm not certain, I might be wrong about this, and you may disagree with this completely, but I'm not certain we can kind of lump creative people in with the same level of need for somebody like a doctor or a lawyer to go through the processes they go through, because it's such an intense, academic process. Now I can hear you all screaming at the screen and saying, Jepson, what are you talking about? Of course it's important. Of course it takes just as much effort. Well, yes, I know. I've been somebody who's sat in my bedroom for hours on end trying to learn the guitar and failing miserably. But I don't mind about that, because I found my purpose wasn't to play an instrument in that way. It was to tell stories. And I now realise that. As I'm now in my 50s, I'm a 57-year-old fellow who's been making music for 40 odd years now, professionally. And it's kind of, that was my thing, it was like I now realise that what I wanted to do was tell stories, because I think it comes from imagination. I think, my purpose is, how did I harness my imagination? I didn't know about it, I didn't know how to do that at the time, but I was compelled to try and follow in the footsteps of those around me, those creative people around me, including my dad and my mum. I guess specifically my dad. My dad was a very creative guy, still is. And so I think, you are affected clearly by your surroundings and by the people you're brought up with. Now I'm probably meandering in this conversation, and there's a good reason why I'm meandering, because it's very hard to put your finger on it. The moment you think you kind of grasp the concept of why, what the purpose is and all that, it kind of slips away, because you don't want to denigrate it, you don't want to elevate it, you just want it to be. That's the thing I guess I've learned over the years, and I'm still learning. Even in my late 50s, I'm still learning that creativity is a process. If you have an idea, you have a spark of an idea, you're inspired. That's the word, isn't it? Inspired. If you're inspired to deliver an idea, to manifest physically, in most cases, I certainly think with music, well, any of the arts really, there's a manifestation in the physical of a concept, of an idea. When you get that spark, it is absolutely impossible to ignore it. Now, I would say that most people, probably everybody, gets that spark occasionally, and it just depends on how you are willing to deal with it. What your focus is, because I always said this, I think everyone's has the potential of being a wonderfully creative person, creative artist. I think a lot of it comes down to, again, the allowances that you're given as you're growing up, people that you end up associating with and circulating in, and that gives you a kind of license. If you're being consistently told by your parents or people around you that you're no good and you should ignore those impulses and it's not worth it and things like that, then all it really does, I think, for people that suffer that, is it just dampens down the possibilities. So I suppose what I'm really kind of wittering on about here is grasping, isn't it? Grasping that purpose, grasping that inspired moment and wanting to do something with it and where you take it. Now, I think a lot of that happens and starts to solidify and become a foundation for you, obviously, when you're a kid, you know, when you're younger. And I think it's kind of haphazard because, you know, there are those, I guess, like me, like an awful lot of the other musicians I know in the world I've worked with, that, like I say, have no breaks. You know, as soon as that sort of moment comes, that sort of I want to play the guitar moment, or I want to be a singer, or I want to be a songwriter, or I want to be a filmmaker, you know, it's impossible to ignore it. But the weird kind of thing is, oh, my fingers have gone so cold. It's very cold here. The weird thing is that I think the most wonderful time you ever have with it, and I suppose that's what I'm trying to get at really, is the most amazing time it ever felt like to me was when I was, you know, sort of just beginning to understand that I had a need and a desire and a drive and a purpose to explore music. I had absolutely no idea where it was going to go. I had no concept of how to do it. I didn't want to, and this is maybe this is where the unique individual thing comes from all of us, is that my personal feeling about it was I didn't want it to dominate anything. I just wanted to enjoy it. It felt so magical and so exciting and so possible. You know, the possibilities seemed completely endless when that sort of rabbit hole opened up and I heard Night at the Opera by Queen, and specifically actually that record, because that really was my jumping off point, you know. That record, I mean, I did a post on Facebook a couple of days ago, maybe last week, about the fact that this year is the 50th, oh my God, the 50th anniversary in November, actually, of the release of Night at the Opera, which I believe personally is Queen's best record, and I'll fight you for it. But I love all their albums. But that album was absolutely a pivotal moment for me. Hearing Death on Two Legs start on that first track, and then going into Lazy Sunday Afternoon and all that, you know, and the whole journey through that record. I can remember the very first time I heard it. My dad had a cassette of this record. He obviously copied it from someone's album, probably my Uncle Ray, I think, actually. But I discovered that record myself. I can remember being sat in our front room. It was actually our back room in the house. I looked out onto our garden and sort of locked myself into the room and started listening to that record. And it was an explosion, you know, and I can't sum it up really. It was like a bolt of lightning, a kind of realization and awakening, an indication, almost like someone prodding me in the ribs saying, this is what you need to do. Right, I've had to change sides because my fingers, goodness me, my hands are so cold. Anyway, yeah, so that kind of real revelatory moment from Queen, which I thank them for, and I'm sure there's millions of musicians out there that would agree with me. I mean, clearly they're one of the most important bands of all time for all kinds of reasons. But you know, trying to examine that, why that gave me that purpose, is quite challenging, you know. And all I can really say is that there's layers to that music, there's layers to that record, there's layers to Queen. There's a depth, an intellect, a breadth of imagination that is so unbridled, so completely unhemmed in, has no rules, was proffered for the art and for art's sake, was given license by the people that were in that band to be exactly what it wanted to be. And so that purpose and that pure ingenuity and that pure sense of joy that comes through that music is, I think, is the thing that gave me, you know, unbeknownst to me at the time, gave me that feeling of anything's possible. Because I've never been interested or captured by the concept of just being into one kind of music. It's always really frustrated me. And it's the same with my belief in films and novels. You know, I have this, you know, we bandy around this word eclectic so much, don't we? It's like, it's used as a bit of a kind of, oh, I'm sort of, you know, more somehow more plugged in than you, man, you know. But I don't feel like that. What I feel is that there's so much greatness out there. There's so many wonderful things in the art world, be it written materials, music or film, that why would you ignore one aspect of it or several aspects of it in favour of just becoming part of a tribe? Now, that is something that's kind of utterly confounded me over the years, actually. And as I said, all the tribes dance to all the different beats, and that was on purpose, you know. I was feeling it back then when I wrote Young Gods, you know. But anyway, you know, getting back to the point, you know, I think, you know, if you're an aspiring artist of any description, of any medium, whatever it might be, all I can say, and I say this to anyone, I don't care how old, young you are, what walk of life you're in, if you sort of wander around every day with a kind of concept in your head, a little idea, you know, for a film or a book or a poem, or you want and desire to paint or draw, but you've never felt confident enough to do it, or you felt suppressed or oppressed by those around you or people, or just the circumstances you're in that don't give you the confidence to do it, I urge you to do it. I urge you to just even do it in private. You know, I'm absolutely certain, because of the way that we socially gather and the way that the pressures are applied and the kind of crazy and stupid prejudices that exist in our society still to this day, even though we're trying to be more enlightened, although it seems to be going backwards at the moment, if you ask me. But I think that's a byproduct of the fact that we are becoming more enlightened. The old guard don't like it, do they? You know, we are seeing the fall of Rome, if you ask me. But that's another subject. But if you feel those things and you've always felt compelled, go give it a go. What have you got to lose? I would actually say the only thing you've got to lose is your own identity if you don't. Because what's wonderful about any form of creativity, specifically associated with the arts, is that it expresses something deeply within you. It's a valve. It's like some kind of pressure release. For me, that's what it feels like, and I'm sure most other people do that. I've often heard a lot of other musicians say, I'm at peace when I'm playing my guitar, or I feel wonderfully connected to the world, and I feel happy, you know, that word happy, you know, when I play my piano, or I'm on stage, or I play the drums, you know, or I draw, or I'm writing my scripts, or whatever. And it is I think, you know, it quite possibly could be actually one of the most important aspects of human existence, is that allowing that release, that pressure that may have well built up over years to be vented. And what better way than to put pen to paper, finger to guitar, you know, or your eyes to a book, you know? Yes, I just traversed that hill. Loads of ice. It's great, actually. I love it. I've never been a, oh, I just love the sun type. You know, oh God, I'm only happy when I'm in the sun. I'm not. I'm happy in every weather. Look at it. You know, life's an incredible gift, isn't it? And without going too deep and getting too ethereal about everything, one of the big gifts you get as you get older, actually, I think, is that you learn to understand this stuff. You know, you stop. I certainly have, anyway. I've started to stop obsessing about stuff that really doesn't matter, and kind of getting anxious and gnashing my teeth about things that haven't happened. Well, you know what? A lot of reason why things haven't happened is entirely down to me, not down to anyone. It's not anybody else's fault. I guess this comes back to exactly what I've been talking about, the sense of purpose. You know, you've got to, and how you maintain that sense of purpose, because that's a big one. Because, you know, that kind of beautiful purity of the initial rush and flush of anticipation and expectation, being in the art world, of doing something with music, creating a film, writing a book, wanting to be a writer, wanting to be a journalist, whatever, it lasts a very precious short space of time, because as your synapses start to connect and you start to create those important connections in your mind and your brain that essentially is learned behavior, isn't it? You know, we know this. It takes, what's the adage? You have to do things 10 times for it to begin to become something that you are used to. So doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But how many times have people joined a gym in January and gone twice and then given up? You know, it's getting over that kind of, that hillock, that mountain, to get it past the 10 times point where it starts to feel like you're doing it habitually and you're learning from it, and it's not just what it was when it started, it becomes something else, and it starts to accelerate, and the next minute you're changing your plan because what you started to do wasn't great, and you realize now what mistakes you were making with it, and you completely misinterpreted, can't even speak, I can't even blame the cold for that. You've completely misinterpreted the dynamics of it all, and you now know what it is because you're getting used to it. This is the wonderful nature of learning. This is how it feels, and at its best, that's what it feels like. And then what happens is you get to a point where you feel incredibly confident, or you can do. I'm not saying everybody does, but you can get to a point where you feel very confident that what you're doing actually has some relevance, has a kind of pulse to it, has something you feel you can offer, because you can't help it again. It's just too delicious to keep it to yourself. It's like bursting over the edges of your personal cup, you know, and you have to and demonstrate it. You have to give it to other people to look at, to read, to watch, because you need some kind of validation. That's part of it. But also, you want to please. I mean, I don't know any musician that doesn't want to play their instrument and be in a band for any other reason apart from to please people, to get out there and to do something cool that other people can enjoy. It's a kind of weird, it's such a weird relationship, because oddly, and I've talked about this on these walk and talks before, it's actually a very selfish thing to be creative and to be creating some art. It has to be, because you've got to get it from yourself. I think that's an important point, but also it's very, I now know it's that's very easy to understand. If you make a mistake, and you do this very early on by just copying people, and if you carry on copying people for the rest of your sort of creative journey, if you like, in whatever sort of position you find yourself in, then it then becomes a kind of a falsity. It's an empty vessel. It takes a great deal of bravery, I think, and I say this about myself. Often it's driven by traumas, it's by bad experiences a lot of the time. Love relationships that fall apart, you know, just relationships that fall apart, or home life, or whatever. But, you know, once you sort of start to tap that personal vein, that understanding of yourself, and it starts to infiltrate your work and become part of it seamlessly without you really knowing it, and all of a sudden you're making a statement that you can recognize, it's something you've been through, something you understand. When that starts to happen, that it becomes absolutely insatiably selfish, and so it should do. But like I say, maintaining that level of kind of selfishness and being able to recognize how you can turn that very personal piece of work into something that other people can enjoy, that's quite a skill, and that is something that you do need to learn. And I do think those kinds of, you know, the journeys you go on of making mistakes, you know, again, a classic sort of cliche is that, you know, failure is just success in waiting. I think it's totally true. You know, you have to fail, get it wrong, or figure it out, and you know, we know this. That's a very easy thing to understand. But it's another skill, learning to figure out where the strengths lie and how you can then present those strengths with But here's the key: keeping the purity of the initial idea without ruining it. Very, very difficult. So in conclusion, like I say, you may not have got anything out of this little walk and talk, but I hope it's pointed out a few little things, specifically to do with my own view on it. Because like I say, it's very hard to sum it up. But I do think purpose, is the key, and holding on to that purpose and being able to maintain it. And the thing is, it changes a lot. And especially as you get older and, you have a family perhaps, or, you move house and you go to a different country, there's all sorts of things that happen to us, in life. It's that famous quote, life is what happens whilst we're making plans. Very, very true again. John Lennon, I think. You have to you have to make a decision to roll with the punches and allow that flex to happen. Because things don't change, things don't stay the same, rather they do change, whether you like it or not. And so it comes down to a sort of sense of what is the underlying sense of your purpose. If your purpose is to continue to do good things and to talk to people in a positive way and show your vision of the world, and to encapsulate it in something that's really intriguing and exciting enough to keep people listening, watching or reading, then if that's the underlying factor, then I'm here to tell you can flex, you can change, you have to. It's pointless standing still and digging your heels in and saying, no, I'm just going to carry on wearing the same spandex and white boxer boots and Rising Sun t-shirt and pretending I'm 20 years old when I'm 65. I personally don't agree with that. Yeah, okay, if that's your style, man. But I think, inherently that becomes a problem, because what you're really trying to do is kind of recapture and hold on to the things that perhaps were the initial inspirations. But, like I say, things do change. Things also slow down. Your attitudes evolve, and new things come along. And one of the things I've realised hang on, there's a big truck coming. 2 seconds. Sorry about that. Quite busy here today. One of the things I've realised as I've got into my 50s specifically is that, you start to, you can't help it. And I don't want to be morbid about this, but you start looking at your mortality. You start thinking about, what you're going to do for the rest of your life, which is actually infinitely shorter than what you've just lived. That's the kind of shocking thing about it. Now I'm 57. There's no way I'm going to live another 57 years. I mean, I'm not even certain I would want to, but my point is, like I said, I'm not wanting to be morbid, and I'm not a kind of fatalist like that. I want to try and enjoy every aspect of my life and try some different things. I think that's the glory of living, is that we live in a very privileged situation in the UK and in the Western world in general. Yes, we have our challenges. Yes, who knows what's going to happen over the next 4 or 5 years. There's a lot of challenges going on in the world, as we know. But I genuinely don't think, actually, if you strip away the white noise, you strip away the toxic nature of the way that people talk to each other, I don't think things are any different, really. Not really. Go back to the 1930s. Go read a history book. I mean, at any point in history, Europe's been in turmoil. I guess it's the sad, terrible nature of being human, the human experience. But that segues beautifully into my final point, that actually those things are there for us to report upon as creative people. So if you're going to be creative, and if you're going to do something that makes you feel happy because you can create something and you can sit there and say, I've done this, read this, look at this, listen to this, and that it's sparking someone's imagination, or you're answering a question that perhaps someone doesn't know how to answer themselves because of the fact you've got the narrative right, or you've certainly maybe not got it right, but you've conjured a conversation. That's really potent and really important. And so I think anything that's going on around the world, that's going on around in your own life, bring it into your work. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Bravery is the key to success in the art world. You only have to look at any of the great artists, whether it's John Lennon as a great singer, or Picasso, or it doesn't matter who it is. the great filmmakers, you know. I often think about Tarantino, how he changed the film industry, and he didn't go to film school or anything. He just picked up a camera and wanted to tell stories. That's brave. He wanted to tell his own story, and that's the important thing. Anyway, so that's purpose for you. If you've got a purpose, do try and follow it through, because I think you'll lead a far more fulfilling life if you can. Now again, this is only my own views, and thank you so much for watching. And please, if you want to go check out anything I'm doing, it's tobyjepsonofficial.com. I've got a shop there for my merchandise, etc. And there's lots of new music coming in the next few months, so I'm looking forward to hearing your reactions to that. Take care, peace, have a great time. Thank you.